we as a country are facing the most significant crisis of our lifetimes.
Have you spoken to Donald Trump in recent days?
Thank you for the question. I haven't spoken to the president in recent days. We'll speak when it makes sense.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the biggest crisis of our lifetimes.
Mark Carney held a press conference today in Kelowna, BC, where he tried to tell everyone that he was building Canada strong. However, he's finding it impossible to do that without a trade deal in place with Donald Trump. And he's failed to meet even his own deadlines to get something done. So it's no wonder that after being asked if he's even called Donald Trump, he had no answer.
Let's take a look.
Good morning, almost good afternoon, Prime Minister Carney.
Thank you.
My name is Claudia Van Emmerich. I'm with Global News. My question for you is that the Trump administration has increased the general tariff rate as well as double tariffs on steel and aluminum, yet your government has not retaliated. How do you justify to Canadians who have voted you in to be elbows up against Trump that your government has not fired back, that you have not retaliated? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. I think the first thing to recognize is, and I said this in my remarks, but I'm going to repeat for emphasis, which is that 85% of the trade between Canada and the United States is tariff-free. That's our exports to the United States, that's U.S. exports to Canada. And we recognize that. We recognize very much the United States reaffirmation of this core element of CUSMA, or what they would call USMCA. So it's important to preserve that. It's important to reinforce that. And part of our discussions is about that. We are also very cognizant that in about 9 months from now, the first review of USMCA, CUSMA as we call it, will begin between the three parties. So there's a bigger picture there. The third thing, just from context, is we have always said that we will apply tariffs where they had the maximum impact in the United States and a minimum impact in Canada. And so we don't automatically adjust. We look at what we can do for our industry that's most effective. In some cases, that will be to remove tariffs. We have removed some tariffs over time so that, for example, the auto industry can function more effectively. And we'll look at opportunities to do so, because in the end, we're looking at having the best impact in Canada. The last point, if I may, which is what today is very much about, is we're focused on a positive agenda of building forward for our major industries, those most affected. The softwood lumber industry, clearly, steel, aluminum, other industries as well. And that agenda starts at home, being our own best customer. It goes to big investments in improving our competitiveness, upskilling, helping our workers improve their skills, and it's also diversifying trade, and that's where we're focused. Thank you.
Okay, so if you were to have Mark Carney answering this question back in the election, he would be disagreeing with himself on almost every point.
Well, yeah, because it sounds like his answer is, well, you know, we don't always do what the U.S. is doing. You know, maybe they put tariffs on us, but we took some off. How is that elbows up?
Well, and recall that he would say we would retaliate with dollar for dollar tariffs, whatever the United States throw at us.
We will fight Trump's tariffs with counter tariffs of our own that will cause maximum damage in the United States with minimum impact here in Canada. And that's what we're doing. They're already complaining about it.
Maybe by retaliate, he meant take off.
Yeah, maybe. But the other thing is that he tried to downplay the whole tariff issue. He's like, well, 85% of the stuff that's actually tariffed is covered under the USMCA, so it's not a big deal. Oh, wait a minute. This is what us and Juno News and other organizations were actually calling out back in the middle of the election when you were trying to say, oh my God, he's coming after our auto sector. That's what we were trying to say back then. And he even said as well, this is the biggest crisis of our lifetime.
We as a country are facing the most significant crisis of our lifetimes.
The most significant crisis of our lifetimes. The most significant crisis of our lifetimes.
Yeah. President Trump wants to break us so that America can own us.
Now he's saying, well, it's not a big deal.
Well, and we spoke about that not only during the election, but immediately after, when we found out that Carney and the Liberals had removed tariffs by, what was it, April 13th? Or mid-April.
Right.
So, but they were still campaigning on the fact that, well, Donald Trump is coming after us with his tariffs. I think a lot of Canadians really did get bamboozled this election. And we just hope that reports like this are able to make it out to them so that they can see and hopefully make a different choice next time.
Hi, Prime Minister Carney. Brady Strachan, CBC Kelowna. Have you spoken to Donald Trump in recent days, and will you retaliate with more counter tariffs, including on American steel, or countermeasures or lift countermeasures already in place?
Thank you for the question. I haven't spoken to the president in recent days. We'll speak when it makes sense. With respect to steel specifically, we announced a comprehensive approach on steel 2 weeks ago, which included significant support for repositioning, significant support for Buy Canadian, and with respect to, if I can draw some distinctions, with respect to softwood lumber, obviously the core of the demand domestically, not all of it, but the core of the demand, or much of the increase in demand, can be through our new approach to home building in this country. With steel, the defense procurement comes into play. The broader infrastructure investments is part of our building national projects of national significance and the requirements we'll have around those. So we had those elements there, plus some industry repositioning. So we feel, look, it's a challenging position. We have put in place a series of measures, and I would add one other thing, which I think is it's relevant. I know it's relevant for Canada, but I would submit that it's very relevant for the United States. We've also put in place the toughest measures against foreign steel that could be dumped into Canada or transshipped through Canada to other markets. So again, I just wrap that into the broader discussion.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the biggest crisis of our lifetimes.
And he hasn't even talked to Donald Trump recently. We've heard, and again, this is speculation, but we have heard that Donald Trump was refusing to take his calls.
Yeah. And I go back to this. This was such a crisis. Needed a mandate. Need someone to negotiate with Donald Trump. We're going to have a deal before the G7. We're going to have a deal by the end of the G7. We're going to have a deal at the beginning of July. We're going to have a deal by July 21st. We're going to have a deal by August 1st. When's the new deadline, Carney?
He just keeps pushing that goalpost.
So you end up having this guy saying, well, we'll talk when it makes sense.
But that sounds like a scorned lover being like, well, my boyfriend won't talk to me, but, we'll talk when it makes sense. We'll sort things out when it makes sense. Like, it's ridiculous.
And meanwhile, you have people losing their jobs. Meanwhile, you have people paying a lot more for goods coming into Canada. Meanwhile, you have Mark Carney sitting there, happy as a clown. And this is supposed to be elbows up. This is supposed to be the tough negotiator. This is supposed to be the guy that says, we're going to handle Donald Trump.
Again, I think Canadians were bamboozled this past election. They were sold a lie. Many Canadians bought it. And now they're finding out exactly what their vote bought them.
Well, and the good part about this, folks, one of the dangers in promises and promises not being fulfilled when it comes to a government taking over is that Canadians will forget about what the promises were, and then they'll just go on with their lives. The silver lining on all of this is that Canadians, the Canadians that voted for Mark Carney and the Liberals, they voted for him because of mainly one reason. He's going to be the guy to deal with Donald Trump, and he's going to be the guy to get the deal.
We can handle him. We can handle Donald Trump.
So the issue is all they're hearing in the news is new tariffs from Donald Trump. Donald Trump has signed deals with other countries. Donald Trump has signed a deal with Pakistan, with Korea, with Vietnam, with the UK, with the European Union, and on and on and on and on and on, and not Canada. So this is something that is remaining visible and remaining audible for Canadians, so they won't forget. And a lot of those Canadians are changing their minds about Mark Carney because he hasn't actually been able to get any deal whatsoever done with Donald Trump.
Barb Aguirre, Kelowna Courier. Do you feel the U.S. under the Trump administration would honor any trade agreement that Canada could negotiate, seeing that they're a perceived unreliable trade partner?
I think this, when you're in a negotiation like this, and it's a very fluid one, you're looking for real win-win opportunities that make an agreement reinforcing. First, that's the first point. So, looking at those areas where the U.S., the president personally puts a very high emphasis on. So the president cares deeply about cross-border flow of fentanyl, ending the scourge of fentanyl. So do we. We are in the process of cracking down on fentanyl. We've got 1,000 more RCMP personnel coming on board. We have 1,000 more border agents. We've got better surveillance technology. We're cracking down on transnational gangs. We're doing all those things first and foremost for Canada, but actually it helps solve the issues with the United States, issues which, to be absolutely transparent, Canada is a rounding error for relative to other sources of fentanyl into that country. But that's an example where we will continue to do things in a win-win way. In the sector, in the steel sector, in the auto sector, we firmly believe, and the auto companies would absolutely reinforce this, is we are essential to the competitiveness of the American auto sector. How do we reinforce that? That's part of what we're talking about. Last point, and there's many others to make, but, and I reference this in my remark, you see these countries making commitments for investments in the United States. Canada is the second largest investor in the United States today, in the world. We have 40 million people. We are the second largest investor in the United States in the world. And that puts in context the state of the relationship, the future potential with an agreement, and some, I'm not saying all of that, but without an agreement, there will be less, by definition.
And let me tell you, Mark Carney knows a lot about investing in the United States. Just saying. Because that's where over 95% of his portfolio actually exists, in the United States. But let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about that. The point is, folks, is that he is now downplaying Donald Trump, and he's downplaying the significance of these tariffs. He created the crisis of Mark Carney, as Desiree Fixler said when we interviewed her. And he sold these swing voters snake oil. And he said this is the biggest crisis of our lifetimes, and the media grabbed it, ran with it, and took that ball over the finish line for him. Scared the bejesus out of all kinds of Canadians across this country, and a lot of them bought it. And they said, oh, well, who but a PhD? Who but a former governor of the Bank of Canada and governor of the Bank of the UK? Who but he could deal with Donald Trump? Meanwhile, he has nothing to show for it. All he's accomplished is increasing the projected deficit of Justin Trudeau by over 50%, up to $92 billion a year.
That's going to make inflation go wild.
And he's talking about building over 500,000 homes per year. Yeah, we've heard that one before.
Well, there have been less housing starts this year than in previous years, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. And if he thinks that he's going to build 10 by 10 buildings and call them houses for people, who's going to buy those? because I think the average family is not going to fit into a 10 by 10 tiny home, which seems to be what this plan is going to be. But that remains to be seen. We need to see a budget, and we're hoping to see that in the fall economic statement. Initially, Francois Philippe Champagne said, we're not going to have one. And then everyone started screaming bloody murder. And then all of a sudden, Carney comes out and says, whoa, we're going to have one in the fall.
Well, because it's very important for Canadians to know exactly how the government is spending our money. And that is done through a budget. And the opposition parties are there to scrutinize that budget and call for things to be removed, call for things to be added, call for things to be changed. That's the job of the opposition. The government doesn't just get to spend our money however it pleases.
Well, and you just watch Mark Carney, whenever this budget comes out, he's going to say, well, whatever we're spending, that's capital spending. That's not operational. Our operational budget is going to be balanced.
And that's exactly what they're going to do. And then they're going to say, oh, we balanced the budget. They're going to balance the budget by breaking it into two parts, balancing part of it and letting the other part run hog wild.